Hi, my name is Gabrielle Isaac Allison, and for my capstone project, I decided to analyze the millennial college experience through the lens of expectancy violation theory. I wanted to do this to understand how expectations about the benefits of college were formed, if they were violated, and how millennials and Gen Z responded to those violations. Expectancy violation theory is a communication theory developed by Burgoon in the 1970s to explain how people react when an expectation is violated during a communication event. The theory originally centered on nonverbal reactions to these violations. The progression of an expectancy violation begins with socialization. Through socialization, we develop expectations about how others will communicate with us, and we usually assume those expectations will be met. When they're not, though, a violation occurs and people can respond in both positive and negative ways. For example, you might expect a coworker to keep a professional distance during a conversation, but say they move in much closer. If you feel a positive connection with that coworker, you might interpret the behavior as friendly or even welcoming. But if you don't, you might see it as uncomfortable or even threatening. EVT has since evolved to examine both verbal and nonverbal reactions to unmet expectations. My aspiration for this project was to scale the application of EVT from reactions to interpersonal violations to reactions to violations that came as a result of unmet expectations after cultural or mass socialization. To accomplish this, I wanted to explore expectancy violations related to the millennial college experience. College was originally meant for the elite ruling class, but began to shift toward a college for all narrative, particularly after World War II, to help meet some of the requirements of skill-specific jobs, as industry boomed following years of rationing. By 2009, college enrollment numbers hit their peak. Existing literature provides strong evidence that parental, peer, and institutional conversations reinforce the college for all narrative, socializing young adults to believe that college degrees could grant a guaranteed pathway to career and financial success. The narrative was received well by millennials, who are still considered the most well-educated generation in American history. Unfortunately, though, the literature clearly reveals that the expectations of college providing a strong pathway to both financial and career success were ultimately unmet, evidenced by declining livable wages and underemployment. Given the existing literature, I aim to explore how millennials were socialized to believe college was a pathway to success, how they experienced violations of their expectations, and how those violations influence their social and career outcomes. I also wanted to take a look at how the millennial collegiate experience shaped Gen Z's perceptions of higher education. My study began with an anonymous Google form that asked 4 biographical questions, 15 Likert scale questions, and 3 short answer questions. Additionally, I used some of the verbal responses gathered in the documentary interview to complement the statistical analysis. The questions were sent to interested parties within my social and professional networks via a messaging platform. Respondents had to be members of the millennial or Gen Z generations to receive the link. For conciseness here, I have included the Likert scale questions in the results section of this presentation so that they can be alongside the statistical data that ultimately provided me with a total consensus response and consensus responses by generation. My survey received 18 respondents, with 11 being millennials and 7 being Gen Z. Of the 18 surveyed, 8 identified as Black, 9 as white, and 1 chose not to disclose their racial identity. As depicted in the pie graph to the right, most respondents reported having at least some college. Not shown there is that all millennial respondents had either begun a 4-year degree or earned at least an associate's degree. Most millennials, regardless of the amount of education they had, reported earning between $30,000 and $60,000 a year. To find the consensus answer for each item, I calculated the total mean score and standard deviations and also broke that down by generational responses. The corresponding numbers were used to decide the degree to which the respondents agreed to each question. It is important to note that the Likert scale questions were measured on a scale from 1, strongly disagree, to 5, strongly agree. The standard deviations were taken into account when deciding the consensus answer for each item. For the short answer questions, most respondents said they had received positive messages about the benefits of going to college. The advice offered to future students from those who had earned some level of higher education was more mixed. When looking at the overall responses to the question about how Gen Z views the millennial college experience, the results appeared neutral because millennials didn't answer that item. But when focusing only on Gen Z participants, the opinions were almost evenly split. Some viewed the millennial experience positively, some viewed it negatively, and others said it had little influence on their own perceptions of college. A few themes stood out. Many participants said they were socialized to believe that college is necessary for success. Those with at least some college education encourage future students to research their field carefully before committing to college, or to consider alternative pathways that might not require a degree. Gen Z respondents also noted that successful millennial siblings shaped their views in positive ways, while others said that seeing millennials struggle without degrees strengthened their belief that they personally needed a college education. The study provided preliminary support for all of my research questions. For RQ1, millennial respondents reported receiving socialization about college benefits through positive word of mouth from parents and school officials. They also expressed a stronger belief that media promoted the benefits of college. Those findings suggest that word of mouth remains a powerful influence on potential student attitudes toward college. And interestingly, Gen Z respondents also noted that many of the messages they received about college came from parents and school officials, which reinforces the idea that interpersonal and institutional voices shape early expectations. In support of RQ2, the study data suggests that millennials expected to make more money with a degree, but they were less likely to agree that the degree increased their immediate earning potential. To cope with unmet expectations, some millennials reported shifting jobs or finding additional income streams. And finally, with RQ3, unmet expectations drastically impacted social and career outcomes for millennials. The demographic data showed that most millennial respondents reported annual incomes between $30,000 and $60,000, but recent reports suggest that $80,000 a year is now required to comfortably meet essential expenses, repay debt, save, and cover discretionary spending. This income gap helps explain why many major life decisions like home ownership, marriage, and having children are being delayed or foregone. Increasing retirement ages can also contribute to a lack of career mobility for millennials. The study also found that Gen Z participants agreed with traditional expectations to a lesser degree than millennials, suggesting a gradual shift in college-related norms. This shift is further reflected in behavior, with 42% of Gen Z respondents attending or planning to attend a trade school rather than pursuing a 4-year degree. There were also some rather interesting results when considering the respondents' racial identity. Black millennial respondents agreed more than white respondents that they received messages from their parents and school officials about college benefits. They also more strongly agreed that their expectations were to achieve a higher earning potential with a degree than their white counterparts. This could suggest that Black respondents may have been marketed the benefits of college more than white respondents. The racial wage gap has always existed in the U.S., and while no respondent specifically talked about it, it is possible that college was framed as a solution to narrow the wage gap. There were several limitations associated with this study. First, the study design required respondents to rely on their memory, which can introduce recall bias. The Likert scale responses also leave little room for nuance or context, which may have led some to pick a neutral stance. The sample size was limited to my personal and professional networks, limiting my reach to different respondents. Additionally, more millennials participated in this study, which could skew the total data toward the millennial opinion. Most respondents had a college degree and a moderate income, and racial diversity was limited, making some of the respondents quite homogeneous. Their similarities don't give a good representation of the diversity in the U.S., making the results less generalizable. Lastly, the study didn't take factors like degree choice, institutional selection, geographic region, or first-generation status into account. Additionally, economic influences like the Great Recession and COVID-19 were not incorporated, though this may have shaped financial experiences. There are several areas for future study on this topic. The first is studying the impact the Great Recession had on millennials to see if a college degree would have still met their expectations without recession-related disruptions and long-term impacts from the recession. Another study could explore whether avoiding college debt influences major life decisions like family formation and home ownership and improves overall financial and career success. Gen Z's path over the next decade could be compared to that of millennials to understand if shifting expectations and career choices make much of an impact. Next, a study of college socialization by racial identity could help reveal if certain racial groups receive stronger messages encouraging college as a route to financial security. This could help identify gaps in diversity education and how unrealistic messaging could be widening the racial wealth gap as opposed to closing it. And finally, a longitudinal expectation study could be conducted to track how high school students align their expectations when given accurate economic and career data. This could explore whether the narrative that college is essential has become culturally pervasive, causing students to continue to attend college even if it won't ultimately benefit them. The purpose of this study was to understand how millennials were socialized to view the value of a college degree, what expectations they formed, and whether those expectations matched their actual outcomes. Many millennials were taught that college was essential for financial and personal success, yet many later found out that their earnings and opportunities didn't align with what they had been led to expect. These unmet expectations often affected their social and career paths. In comparison, Gen Z seems to be forming more realistic expectations and choosing educational routes that better support their financial futures. The study contributes to the expansion of EVT by showing that expectations can be shaped by broad cultural and institutional forces, not just interpersonal ones, and that violations can build over time and have significant impacts on life trajectories. It also demonstrates how expectancy violations can potentially have effects that are passed down through generations. The implications of this reveal that a lot of violations actually stem from socialization rather than realistic, fact-driven grounding. Understanding how expectations form and shift can help parents, educators, and students make more informed decisions about education and career planning.